Okay, good evening, everyone. It is Thursday, December 11th. I'm Randi Shannon, your host and moderator for our call, 42action.org. We have a special guest here tonight. I think you're all going to enjoy what he has to say. You may all end up using what he and his organization are doing. We've kind of formed a strategic alliance. A lot of us for the last 2 years have been looking for some remedy, and this gentleman, he's a founder of the Peacemaker Society, and we're so glad to have you on. Marcel, if you would give everybody a little bit of a background about yourself and what got you started, what made you found this organization, and then tell us what Peacemaker Society is all about.
Happily. First of all, hi everyone. Thank you so much for having us on, Randy. Nice to talk to you as always. With regarding the information that we've managed to kind of research and organize very well and then go out and prove ourselves, essentially how I got into this in my background professionally, I kind of moved out at a young age, at about 14 or 15 from my parents, and the only reason that's relevant is I started studying Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill and Psychology of Selling by Brian Tracy. So I fell asleep to those for about 8 years every night, just kind of programming myself. And then I got into brokering natural gas at 17. And they go door to door and sign people up for natural gas broker deals, which is a type of security interest. So long story short is, once I was about 25, I had some interaction with the law where I was like, how can that happen? And then at 29, a group of us got together. We live in Winnipeg, and there's a lot of abuse in Winnipeg, just amongst friends and people that we don't know. We just see it all day, every day. So we just decided to study law like a product. And then I also used to have a sales consulting business where I've been a top producer for probably about 50 or 60 pretty major corporations. And what I started doing is I would redesign their sales presentations to triple their sales by simplifying the language and organizing it better so people could understand. And anything that would be a fear trigger, we answer the question proactively so that it just guides people through it, and there's none of that. So we essentially did that with law. I have one credit in grade 10. I have no formal background in law, but we went through and we actually organized every area of law and then just researched what the differences are between it. And then like the sales programs I used to develop, we just went out and actually tested it. And I did a lot of that, dealing with different government agencies, just figuring out what the process was to basically get them to back down when they're infringing on somebody's rights. And we're undefeated in almost 6 years. About 2 weeks ago, we were finally in court face-to-face with judges and let them know we're aware they're just a corporation. They're listed on Dun & Bradstreet. To keep the peace, we're not going to go after them in that instance, but we are opening up the advocacy line, which is what we're talking about with you guys at 42action.org, is you guys being a branch of our advocacy department where basically we take incident reports from anyone worldwide. Our society, we have jurisdiction. We're correct in corporate law, common law, and natural law because we hold sovereign rights held by indigenous power. So your rights come from within, you and the universe, whatever that means to you in law. Put your soul in your living vessel, so your nation unto yourself. So your rights can never be taken or given, only exercised or not. And if you and two people sign a piece of paper, that's your society. 3 letters, 50 days, it cures as your law as per due process, and then anyone who infringes on that, as long as you haven't caused harm first, you have full financial remedy to go after them, as well as we found the places in law that actually reference you being able to either have private security, and then recently we've been seeing, even in the U.S. actually, ex-veterans using local sheriffs of the corporate system, citing the correct legality, and then actually having boards arrested who were not allowing public comment and things like that. So basically, because we're correct in all 3, corporate law, common law, and natural law, but we stand under our own law, we're able to actually coach the system while still standing up to it and always reserving our rights and in no way bowing to that. So we have identity documents that a notary basically attested we were correct to process, so that replaced all of our corporation posing as government ID. And we have bank accounts with TD, and they're also in the U.S. as well. And it literally, what we do, it just makes it you have privacy, and then you're unregistering, unincorporating your assets, so they're held in a society, not under your name, and then that society is your shield. And there's no joinder, so it makes it easier. You can't claim it personally, but they'll always play the name game with you if you do that. So that's kind of my overview quickly. I'm going to kind of put the ball back in your courts, and I'll participate as you need on whatever you guys want to talk about.
Okay, so I only muted a couple of you. One was the 319. I'm going to unmute you. Okay, with what he said, I'm getting comments already about that this sounds great already. So you are absolutely going into the private or undoing all the adhesion contracts?
Well, essentially, we figured out that, it's something, at least for me, when we were studying all of the different kind of primary leaders in researching this, the different people that had, these guys have one part of the equation, these guys have another, we found people just don't understand corporate contracting enough. Really, even if you say want to drive with a license, when you sign the piece of paper, you sign your name, if you put all rights reserved beside your name, it's like getting a phone contract. You're agreeing that, okay, you're going to get phone service, but within that, they don't own your rights. And through exercising that legal document, if someone uses incorrect corporate process against your rights, where you haven't caused harm first, and you still operate with them all rights reserved, and you always inform that, it's ideally good to have some sort of recording system around as well, so you have proof. And then once you do that, if they violate you further, anyone is liable for fraud if they use incorrect corporate contracting process against another's moral right, and you can reference abuse of rights doctrine case law. It's not in Canada or the States, but it just references proof that if you commit fraud. And in the Criminal Code of Canada, they reference it in that as well. There's a bunch of places you can point to, and what you want to do with that is you want to reference those things, but you make sure that it's clear you do not stand under them. And that's because, again, you're using your own rights because you're learning how to exercise them now, and you don't submit, apply, or register. Equals do not ask permission. They issue notice as per due process, and to keep the peace and avoid conflict, someone who is your equal will respond back. And what we do in our letters, we demand that all correspondence must be under full commercial liability, under penalty of perjury, under oath or attestation. And so for an agent who has limited liability signing authority, they would have to risk their own assets to answer us back. So using express post envelopes or the proof of mailing with the signature, by doing that, they're not willing to risk their own assets, so it cures, and that's where you get your judgment and estoppel through acquiescence and those kind of things that then have cured. And you're right, in fact, now, honestly, the court system, the corporations posing as, they still don't care. They still pass judgments, but that's where now we're noticing agents individually, and as the world goes, there's a lot of things happening where there's a lot of good people in the system that aren't happy, so even the system is ready for change now, and that's really the big difference. 10 years ago they weren't, but now, we just went, I just finished, I was doing an unalienable rights patrol about 2 years ago. I got assaulted by the downtown biz. They're technically peace officers. I defended myself. I quoted all the right stuff. I punched them in the face once, which again in the future I won't. If I look at it as a support worker, you shouldn't throw a punch. Within that, though, I believe I was right in self-defense. The judge still sided with them. The difference being, though, I went through the whole process with all rights reserved. Mike Cook, he is a very well-known lawyer in Winnipeg, and he is officially after me accepting all rights reserved cases. He actually mentions on the record, he went on the record stating that we don't believe in their jurisdiction after I informed that they are a corporation, and I reassured them I wasn't going to go after them that time. So again, it's just setting the precedent of the chess match. So now that we've done that, we can open peacemaker community courts worldwide, and the Cree Nation did that locally throughout. Well, there's different First Nations that did it. It was after the Aboriginal Justice Inquiry with all the residential school stuff that went down with all of that. So now they have sovereign courts in the corporate court. So we're just going to create our own buildings and open that up in peacemaker community courts throughout history. Our community courts that anyone can set up. They can be run in a gym, in a church, or whatever. And as long as there's 3 witnesses and it's done correctly, it's binding. And again, your competent law jurisdiction versus their incompetent jurisdiction. It's really a law of administration. So, I mean, there is the stuff happening in the street, and that's all very real, and, I'm not taking away from that. We need people on all sides, but the way that you actually back them down and muzzle them, essentially, agent by agent, is one letter that we have that we've perfected, where we just print out an incident report, attach it to the litigation letter, and we use that one letter. We just change the date and the name. So, like with Randi and you guys coming on board, one individual can process maybe 50 to 100 complaints in an hour, as where before in non-templated kind of system, you would have to spend several hours on one. So we're able to advocate vastly less than what you would normally pay. So a minimum gift for our advocacy line to call in is $50. And then from there, we'll do the quote. And the average range for us to help out is somewhere between 200, or people, if they owe a tax agency $500,000 or more, for those we're getting about $5,000 per client as a gift. We define it all as gifts between independents, so it's non-taxable, whether you're in the system or out. And we have copies and all of this available if you just go to YouTube, Peacemaker Society. It's our original live video content. We go through our contract, and you can check it all out for anyone who's listening.
So let's go back to the IRS thing, and your sound is just a little bit, it goes in and out.
Oh, there
I
were
don't know if
beeps coming through of people checking in. I'm not sure if that was it or not, but go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, so let's say the IRS just sends somebody a typical bill. Hey, taxpayer, you owe $1,500. What would the... Okay.
Excellent question. Well, the first thing that we would do is you would call our line, and then basically we would go through the process. We'd see how involved it is, and then what I've been doing, I have 2 clients I'm working with right now, so I'm just going to talk about the specifics without talking about any of their private information, obviously. But what I did with them is they got in touch with me, I reviewed it, I called Canada Revenue Agency, which is Canada's equivalent, same exact thing. They're usually pretty much a bully, but I just let the agent know that we're a private, unregistered, unincorporated law firm of laymen and laywomen advocate representatives. So within that, interacting with us, it's going to be under full liability. So it's not that our client is refusing to pay. They're happy to pay if they owe it, but we're going to use the banking administrative process. This is the process banks use to prove whether they owe a debt. So first of all, we need the original contract, the original accounting. There's a few other things that we need from them. And when they send it, I just let them know up front, if it turns out that it doesn't meet the terms of a valid agreement, let's say there's no meeting of the minds, there's no full disclosure, they didn't explain that they're bonding people into slavery and committing corporate contract fraud, stuff like that. I don't get into those last 2 lines up front, but I'm just for people listening. And then within that, once I do that, I let them know that if they're incorrect to process, regulations are setting them up to be personally liable. And where we're having really success right now is all these agents are worried personally, right? Like in the back of their head, they're worried, when am I going to be liable? And none of these people actually made the system. So our philosophy is we're kind of doing a big do-over like in kindergarten. Things got out of hand, let's just chill it out. Within that going forward, once they're noticed, now they're liable, right? So they're going to have 2 choices. They can either, once we notice them, the paperwork, they go ahead and if they contact again, we bill them $1 million per infraction. And if you have a roofer work on your house, he doesn't, if you don't pay the bill, he just puts liens. We don't go to court. We bill like a contractor, 45 days it defaults, and then we have the right to go after them with liens and all commercial remedy available to us. In the long run, we plan on empowering sheriffs to collect property on that side of things. And then, of course, long run, we'll have unregistered, unincorporated equivalents within what lawful means are, and we'll adjust it area by area to make sure it's correct to what local standards are and community stuff and all of that as well. Because ultimately, it's local people that customize our templates to them. We're not actually here to really tell anyone what to do. We just researched all the options, and we're like a life coach for freedom on how to get there, and we only teach our proven results. We needed to do it that way because, one, if I just repeated what everyone else did, it'd be plagiarism. And then the second side of that is if I'm fully liable, which I am as signatory for all of our programs, everything we do, if they ever are designed and cause harm, we're liable for every penny. So in 6 years, we've never caused any harm. We've never had anyone come after us because we don't cause harm to life, liberty, property, and rights. And as long as everyone sticks to that, everyone can do what we do. So we're just teaching basically freedom is sexy, corporate slavery via citizenship is not, and then what does that mean to you? So if you're super religious and you don't believe in booze, your community, that's your community. If you're someone where you're a rock star and you like to party all the time, you have the right as long as you're not harming anyone. And as an equal, you issue notice before you affect others. And then they have the chance to respond. And all law is notice between equals with opportunity to respond. And that's it. And if you don't respond, you're in dishonor, and that's why the other side can cure, because you gave up the right to communicate. And when police say, read you your rights or your legal rights, and they say, do you understand? They're actually tricking you. They're saying, are you accepting this corporate contract? Will you stand under it? So when I get told that, I say, don't stand under that. Anything I sign, I do it with all rights reserved, and as long as I sign all rights reserved, I can bill all of them as a contractor later privately, and at my discretion, I can go after them to whatever extent I choose. Or recently, when I was arrested, I got threatened to actually get killed by police if I did that. They were kind of getting to the point that they understood I was sincere, and I was in their cell and they had punched me about 20 times, so I wasn't really too cooperative at that point. But I agreed not to go after that particular officer personally in exchange for him not trying to find me later kind of thing. So, as much as you can be right, we are dealing with criminals, so we do a lot of coaching on safety, how to actually remove your information from the system once you have our ID and our other systems and that. And I feel like I've been talking for a while, so I'm going to pause and just open up to questions or comments.
Yeah, we do have a couple questions. Okay, Ron, you have a question? Take yourself off mute. Hit *6 if you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, Mark, do you help with foreclosures, like people trying to be getting evicted by these banks? on unlawful detainers?
Excellent question. Basically, we can advocate. Again, the system is criminal, so just at that point, if they're going to come with sheriffs, I mean, we can do it, and it will open them up to liability, and there may be some success with that. What we try and do ideally, and I'm not trying to scare your question, it's just once it gets to that point, and they're physically coming for your property, if you're not organized ahead of time with the society, with the safety mechanisms, with the ability and resources to stand up to them, they're the bigger bully. You're going to get your butt kicked just about every time. And I mean, you can go public. I've still stood my ground even in those situations, but for me it was somewhat safe. You really just have to use your discretion in these times, because again, you can be right and that can still happen. Now, the answer to that that's a little better is when we're coaching people that come to us, we teach you how to transfer your assets from legality to being unregistered, unincorporated under your society. And once you do that, it is literally untouchable. And with the contracts we use, because everything is gifting, the second you switch from using whatever system you're using to ours, you're non-taxable from that day on. Everything's under claim of right. And we are an international court of record for the whole world as a competent law jurisdiction, where we will witness and verify any actions that anyone wants to do, because we understand the criminal corporate courts aren't cooperating or doing their job correctly, and because we've noticed them directly in court now, we're very, very comfortable taking that step. And that's kind of the best answer. So realistically, long run, the best answer to what you're saying is once you own your society, they never know what you own. So your society owns everything, and you can have 50 people with 50 different homes. It'll all just be the society, and then you have private agreements for who owns what. Because again, if a criminal knows where your assets are, sometime or later, they're going to come try and take a piece.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on this.
Yep, please.
My name's Ed Johnston. I'm Oregon Trackers. I've got articles in the paper on this right now running. I'm paying for it.
For sure.
Okay, I'm very adapted to the reality of this. And people, you know, when you get into a contract, like for your driver's license stuff, they cannot hold you to them because you did not know about them.
That's correct.
Anyhow, you have the obligations after that point when you notify their court system. Remember, it's a maritime court system. It's not an American court system at all.
Yeah.
Has no lawful authority on American soil at all.
I agree.
Okay? Because like my neighborhood, I mean, I live in the neighborhood because I'm disabled, and sometimes it doesn't take me a while to clean up my yard or do something. My neighbors have literally tried to steal my land through the system.
I hear you.
And this is the point. You have no authority. Nobody has authority to tell their neighbor what to do. And if they're playing loud music, then when you're playing loud music, they have no right to say anything. But at least the common courtesy that we forgot in our neighborhoods is going to our neighbors and going, hey, I'm doing a party Friday night. I just want to let you know.
Agreed.
You know, people have thought, we have lost common courtesy because we've been so terrified by the mind control of the TV and the radio that if you go out and if you leave your property and you fart in the wind, somebody's going to be after you.
You're right. And
does that make sense?
It is, and that's where people aren't giving notice to others before they act, and by doing that, that is a violation of someone else's right if there's some sort of harm. So even though if it's just loud music like what you're talking, if they didn't give notice and you...
At that point, that's what we have to be neighborly and go to the neighbor and say, hey, dude, you know, if you keep it up, you know, I'm going to have to do something about it. Because you cannot go to the sheriff per se to do something about it, the sheriff of Nottingham. All right, we're supposed to take care of our area under Title 18. We're supposed to be responsible, and this is the education that we're supposed to get when we graduate high school. By all the constitutions in every state, says that you're supposed to know the Constitution and contract law at 12th grade.
Yes, exactly.
We are not doing...
Ed, I just had to mute you just a quick second because Marcel wanted to comment to that. Go ahead, Marcel.
I just wanted to totally agree with what Ed was saying there in absolutely every size, shape, and form. And you know, he's very passionate, and I agree completely. And that's where, again, all rights come from within. So as much as there are charters, constitutions, all of that, no group of people can take away the rights of the individual, right? So again, that's where even democracy as a thing isn't really that good, because the majority can deprive the minority. So if even one individual can be violated, it takes its toll. What I also wanted to mention with regard to defending your property, it'd be referenced somewhere else in the States, but in Canada, it's the Criminal Code of Canada under defense of property. It states anything held under claim of right, and anyone protecting or defending anything held under claim of right, as well as anyone you employ, is not criminally responsible for using any amount of force to defend it, even against those legally entitled to possess it. So I don't know what the reference is in your guys' law is, but I know it's the exact same everywhere because these principles apply universally. So if you can with somewhere, it applies everywhere because it is all that corporate jurisdiction. Washington, District of Columbia, Canada, the corporation is registered in Washington, D.C. at the Canadian Embassy. All of that is that international corporate jurisdiction of District of Columbia, which I'm sure Ed already knows very well. And then within that, I just read recently that all of that around 1945 was all subjugated under the United Nations, basically. What I see happening right now is they're deliberately getting their puppets in politics to act crazy, so eventually they can just basically say, you guys are too incompetent, come in, and that's where that world governance is coming in. But if everyone starts forming their own communities, and the thing that's a little different with us too is we have the financial infrastructure to go with it. Every one of our programs pays very well. We do it as a charity, we're non-taxable, so we're actually promoting not being a business is the new business, because you get to keep all your money. What you're paying people is income tax free, and you get rid of all the red tape liability. So as far as all the people who are entrepreneurs out there, if you don't learn how to do societies and compete that way, you're going to go out of business as the market tanks, as well as just you're 30 to 50% behind on someone with a society because they don't pay a penny in tax, and not one penny of income tax stays in the country. And then the last thing, as far as school goes, we researched that back in the 1900s and before, like Ed was saying, by grade 8, you would know how many republics there were, how many dominions, what your rights were, how to apply them. The PhD system was created in Germany and used by Hitler, and its primary purpose as a form of control. It does lots of good things. I'm not bashing the whole thing, but the thing that's bad in its intent and design is to remove the child from its natural community at 3 to 5 years old. The institution becomes the authority and then strips the local culture and community to its standard. And then you graduate, you get a license, you can be an expert for 20 years and they can still take away your right to earn a living, which as an unregistered, unincorporated man or woman, no one has the right to ever take that away from you unless you've caused harm in life, liberty, property rights. And that's all I wanted to say about that stuff, is just I agree with him across the board and we're on the same page for everything he's saying.
Okay, Ted, I know Ted is on the line. Did you have a question? Ted V.
Can I ask you something?
Sure, please.
Yes, go ahead.
You're a charitable society, whatever that you call it.
We're a non-profit, that's right, yes.
A non-profit? Is that Corporation Soul or any...
No, basically we're unregistered, unincorporated. Basically, to be defined as a non-profit, all that means is 50% or more of the money that comes in as gifts has to go to help society as a whole. So the way we're set up, I've retained 15% budget control, so as our committees get bigger, if we need to open a program somewhere, I don't need permission. I'll have the budget to do it. And then 85% is under our committee's controls and all goes to public programs. And again, it goes to local programs. We basically reverse engineered industrialization to be on a local community level where the ceiling is on the local level, where all goods are local and all wealth created from that stays local, basically, aside from whatever you choose to do. But this whole taxation to strip wealth, as well as exporting jobs to foreign markets to undo the middle class locally, is just a big part of the problem right now. So it's not a free market, it's controlled markets. So by bringing free markets back and freeing the labor, direct taxation on labor is the definition of slavery. And in Canada in 1950, Lord Nelson Case's case law, they ordered the corporation, federal government to abolish income tax because direct taxation on labor is the definition of slavery. So that's the basis you can argue not paying income tax all the way through. Of course, as well as it's just a corporate fraud in that. In Canada, it's the 1985 Canadian Ownership Control and Determination Act. It actually references the bonding of children through certificate of live birth, the stripping of title from parents, and them being pledged as property and chattel of the corporation posing as a government. And your own case law in the States, clear field doctrine case law proves if something's a corporation, it's not a government by definition. One excludes the other. Because to be a government or to be a judge, you have to be fully liable, because you have to be accountable for your actions, or you're incompetent commercially. And who the heck wants somebody incompetent running things? Because that's how we got exactly where we are right now.
On the bonds that they're not paying out right now. What they're doing in the United States is a corruption. I've got the articles running in the paper right now because they've literally tried to assassinate me for bringing out the facts on this, going back to the Treaty of 1213.
And I'm sensitive to that. I'm sorry for your struggles on that. It sucks to be targeted when all you're doing is telling...
For a reason. This is the other point is, this is because the United States is the only place on the planet, all right, that we're the only place that has freedoms for all this, all right? We're the only ones that have a contract with the British government and every other country, but all right? That way we're separate from everybody else.
Yeah. It's just because it's corporate, it's not a government. So that's the lens that really changes the paradigm. Is you're not fighting governments, you're strictly fighting a corporation that's liable as a corporation. But again, because they're limited liability, it takes away the accountability. And that's why by going after the agents now and making them personally accountable, we can make each agent back down, because if they don't, we will destroy them financially. We can always be merciful, but really if they want to push it, they lose. And even if we can't take all of their property, by putting all the liens and all the stuff on it, it still messes up their whole world. But again, if you're in a local market, like you said, Ed, you know, they've tried to come after you. You have to implement the privacy, kind of like you're the mob, except for you're not a criminal. But when you're an honest individual fighting criminals, privacy is really, you know, they can be a lion, and if you're in the mouse hole and they can't get you, then you're okay. And that's where you have to combine street smarts with being right, because otherwise, most of the people I know in the truth movement in the front line are getting their butts kicked. And the reason we haven't, when police threaten to kill me, Winnipeg's kind of a small city, and I've been on the street for a long time, so I just said, if you kill me, people will come after you. You're not the only one who knows people, so why don't you just back off, and we'll just get along to whatever point we can while I'm stuck here. So, you know, it's just, you need real backup and community. If they're not beside you, you can't protect them, period. So it's just, we all need wealth and resources in our family. So in our research, we were like, how do we make society healthy? There's so many problems out there, right? And you can get lost and drowned in it. And that's kind of their game. If you're looking at the problem, you don't see the solution. So we're really past the problems as far as our work and the proof goes. And now it's just us getting bigger than the bully. And that's our membership and the advocacy line in our programs, all of that. Just off of 1 million members, we're going to have 50 million a month, because it's $25 every 2 weeks and a one-time sign-up gift of $25. It's all a gift, and again, all of it goes to programs and that. So within that, we are coming. We're going to we're launching competition to every industry that works, and the industries that exist, we're unregistering and unincorporating them. So literally, we're not getting resistance anymore. It's just learning what we've done and then staying focused on the solutions, using the privacy and the safety things we teach. So if you do, like when police punch me 20 times, I'm trained enough that even though I had a black eye, I wasn't hospitalized. When I went to court, they still found me guilty for assaulting the peace officer, but I got all of my other stuff dropped, and I just got a fine. They didn't send me to jail because I didn't do a criminal act. So even when you lose, you can win a little bit, and sometimes when you win, you lose. There's a guy who's been in jail for 8 months because he wanted to stay in jail and fight. When I was in jail, I did too, but after 8 days, or 10 days, I cured like millions of dollars, and I know, you know, if I don't get that, I'm just wasting my time in here. So we figured out how to use a lawyer to actually get you out of jail. You do it with all rights reserved, and then once you're out, you fire the lawyer and you represent yourself in court after that, so you don't have to spend that 6 to 8 months in jail waiting for a trial that you're probably not going to jail for anyway, especially if there was no injured party. And now I'm going to open it back up to questions. Sorry I'm long-winded, it's just there's a lot to this, and I want to make sure you guys understand.
Randy, I have a question.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Yeah, wow, I really like what I've heard so far. This sounds great. I have a lot. I could fire a bunch of questions at you. The big question is, you mentioned you're an international court of record. That's a pretty big statement. According to who? How do you get that status?
Excellent question. To have a court of record, let's say you and two friends, or even you yourself, you send litigation to someone that they violated you, right? So I'm going to use society as just because that's what we're doing. So I'm going to use specific examples. So for our society, Canada Revenue Agency, we send them the litigation. We're an advocate. We've been empowered by somebody. We're going to stick up for them. When we send that, the proof of mailing that you use, due process cures as its own judgment. You do not need their pretend judges. Due process is its own judgment, because that is the free people's remedy under private law. So if you're competent at exercising due process, which is 3 letters, 50 days, let me explain what that means, because some people may know and some may not. It's a 3-letter process. What due process and equal and notice between equals is, I send you letter 1 as an equal. Let's say there's a ball in the yard between our properties right on the line, and we're not sure whose it is. So I'm going to notice, I can say, hey, Ed, there's that ball between our properties. I don't think it's yours. It's been sitting there for a month. Do you mind if I use it? I don't believe anyone owns it. You just ask a bunch of questions, qualifying questions, basically, and then you send the letter. Now, let's say Ed's busy. 10 days goes by, or he just doesn't care. He doesn't care about the ball, whatever. And in this case, when we're dealing with the corporations pretend to be government, they're a limited liability signing authority, so they can't answer us back because they're not going to do full liability. That's why it works in fact. So anyway, back to the story. We send letter 1, it's questions. When 10 business days go by, that's how long you have to basically allow people to answer you back. They dishonor themselves. So now we have the right to answer those questions as though we gave them ourselves, as though the other party had. So, is that your ball? No, it's not my ball. Do I have permission to use it? Yes, I give you full permission. Do you love me as your neighbor? Yes, I love you as my neighbor. Whatever. You can put whatever perfect answers you want into the questions you ask, right? So you send it again. And again, if Ed is my neighbor and he cares, he's going to answer me back, and then we'll talk about it. We'll come to an arrangement. But in this case, he still doesn't care about the ball. So 10 more days goes by. That letter 2 cures. So letter 1 and letter 2, I asked the questions in 1, I answered it in 2, and now it's cured, and they dishonored, they didn't answer. That is the understanding between equals. I now have the right to claim the right off of. So now I claim the right. I claim the right to use the ball. Here's the answers from before. You give me permission. And then again, if you have a problem, Ed, let me know in 30 days. Those 30 days goes by, according to due process, it is now a default judgment. That default judgment is what I mean when I say a court of record, in that when you keep the litigation and the proof of service, as long as you have 3 witnesses from the public or a notary, either or, your choice, 3 witnesses will replace a notary, though, it's a lawful document, and that is a court of record. So all the litigation that we've done is a court of record. And for the public, we're just acting as a neutral witness to what you do, so that they can't just bury it. If they violate you, you can say, I served this, and we can, as an advocate, say, yes, he did, he's right, you're wrong, and then we can go after them and bill in that. And we have actually in Canada a few people, but one specifically, she was a prosecutor for 18 years, and she worked in defense as well, and she actually abandoned her oath to the law society and the bar, and she's overseeing our lien process and that to make sure it's all perfect. So, that's what I mean by an international law team. First of all, I don't like international because that's nations. We're worldwide. I did say international, but when I say that for future reference so everyone knows, I mean worldwide. And your unalienable rights from within apply worldwide. So because we're correct and we don't cause harm and we're voluntary association, we're correct to corporate law, common law, natural law, that's what gives us worldwide jurisdiction. But again, it's only as long as we cause no harm. And anyone we contract with has to be voluntary, and if we're ever not, we're fully liable, and I'm personally liable as signatory to the organization. And that's why unregistered unincorporated equals accountable, because if they're not, you can go after them and there's no protection for them. So the only protection is not to cause harm, because you will lose all freedom and assets if you try the society unregistered unincorporated system and fail. Now, there are societies that are incorporated, but anything that's registered or incorporated is limited liability in fact and commercially incompetent. And if you're an unregistered unincorporated, you outrank them and you can beat them up with litigation figuratively using the law.
Well, I like that. I mean, you basically said that your paperwork and process is the court, and that is true. That sounds good.
Yeah, and then for mediation in the future, we will use the peacemaker courts, and that's where we've been fortunate to sit down with David Harper. He's a Grand Chief in Winnipeg, and he's actually at one of the Government of Manitoba Education Centers for Aboriginal Affairs and that, and he invited our society about a year and a half ago to sit down, and they walked us through the whole process, how they were able to do it and how it works. So it's a universal truth, and we're Peacemaker Society, and Peacemaker Courts have nothing to do with us. It's just tradition in First Nations, what they call those type of courts. This is what a community court is. So just by fluke, Peacemaker Society courts will fit very much in harmony with that, and that's exactly what we are. We'll be open to all sovereign nations and competent law jurisdictions worldwide for all no-harm cases, and then in the next 6 months to a year, we'll start actually being advocates in courts for people. We're getting in touch with some university programs for how they're able to have standing in court just as advocates in that to actually do real cases, and that's our plan. We want to team up with some local advocate societies and do a prisoner one-on-one program as well. And then we have like free food organic green programs we've launched in the past, community food banks, no-kill animal sanctuaries, and then again, anyone who's